All right, our first goal here in terms of our trig identities, we want to be able to find a numerical value of one trig function of x. And I think we're going to look at that first and get that out of the way so we can focus more on verification, which I think is really the important part here. Second, we want to verify trig identities. Those are our goals in this section. The finding a numerical value of one trig function of x is a lot like simplifying that we did in the last section. In fact, simplifying would probably better fit in this section than in the last one. So, and then verifying is also a lot like simplifying, except you know when you're done. You don't have to go, ooh, can I simplify that any farther? Okay. Which is why I like verifying better than simplifying. So we know when we're done. All right. Anyway, let's start with this. Find a numerical value of one trig function of x, or of the variable, whatever that variable might be, we'll use x. Example 1. Cotangent of x divided by cosine of x is equal to 2. Now, just to elaborate here for a moment on what these directions mean. What means in other words? Is that IE or EG? IE? EG is for example. Okay. IE, what we should have, okay, a numerical value, so some number is equal to some trig function, sine, cosine, tangent, etc. of x. Okay, so what we'll end up with is like a number is equal to the sine of x, like 1/2 equals the sine of x, or 7 equals the tangent of x, or 18 square roots of 5 over 2 is equal to secant of x. Okay, so some number is equal to a value of x when we're done. Now this one's actually really nice because we already have one side being a number, 2. So how about if we just simplify the left-hand side? Do we have any funky-looking angles there? Any negative angles, or pi over 2 minus an angle, or multiple pi plus an angle? No. We do not. So how about if we try writing everything in terms of sine and cosine? What is cotangent of x? Cosine of x over sine of x. Good. Cosine of x over sine of x. Now, some students are really tempted to drop the variable and to not write the x or the theta or whatever. Please don't be that person. That variable is important. And right now, we are only dealing with ones that have a single variable, typically. But we will get to stuff where we have multiple variables, like the sine of x plus y. And then it becomes really important that you keep track of the x's and the y's. All right. And cosine of x, if I write that in terms of cosine of x, well, it's already in terms of cosine of x. So, cosine of x over 1. I know that looks more complicated, but a lot of times you have to complicate things to simplify them. Because now I have a fraction divided by a fraction. How do you divide one fraction by another? By reciprocal. Okay? So we're going to take the numerator, cosine of x over sine of x, and we're going to multiply by 1 over cosine of x. Now what? Cancel what? Cosine of x cancels. Right? Common factor in the numerator and denominator. Factors being things we multiply together. Okay? So we're left with 1 over sine of x is equal to 2. 1 over sine of x, that looks familiar. What is 1 over sine of x equal to? It's what? Cosecant of x. So cosecant of x is equal to 2. Now, do we have a number is equal to a trig function of x? Yes, we do. Therefore, we're done. Okay. Now, there is the possibility, okay, if cosecant of x is 2, then what's the sine of x? 1/2. So it is possible that some student would get sine of x equals 1/2 here, and that would be completely acceptable as well. Okay? They are, in essence, the same statement. They're ratio statements or reciprocal statements, but either one would be an acceptable answer. And you would do that by multiplying both sides by sine of x and then dividing both sides by 2. Or taking the reciprocal of both sides. Sine of x equals the reciprocal of 2. Okay. Questions on that example? Did anybody realize that this was one of the problems we simplified the other day? Did it look familiar at any point and go, oh yeah, we did that one? No? We did this one. It's in your notes. I think it was the first one we simplified when we did simplification. All right, let's look at another one that's similar, actually maybe even a little bit easier. And let me give you a chance to do this on your own. Cotangent x, second example. Cotangent of x over cosecant of x is equal to 0.6. I will give you 2 minutes if need be. All right, so cotangent of x over cosecant of x is equal to 0.6. Okay, so you wrote cotangent of x as cosine of x over sine of x. And cosecant of x as 1 over the sine of x. Is that allowed? Mike, nodding your head yes. Why, Mike? Okay, they're in the denominator, yes. So as long as you have the same factor in the denominators, you can cancel those out. Good. So left with cosine of x is equal to 0.6 or 0.6. Okay. Is that a trig function of x is equal to a number? Yes, it is. So he is finished there. Questions? All right, let's do one more here. We'll do this one together. Example number 3. Which one do I want to do? Those aren't nearly as fun as what I thought they were. Okay, cosine of x equals cotangent of x. Actually, let's do this. Cosine of negative x is equal to the cotangent of x. Anything there unusual? Negative x. Do we have any identities that take care of negative x? No clue. It's not negative cosine x, but yes, there is an identity. You might want to flip back. Find the opposite angle identities, right? We're taking the opposite of an angle. Opposite angle identities. The cosine of negative x is? No. You have it written wrong. Yeah. The cosine of negative x, you should have that the cosine of negative x is cosine of x. Okay? So cosine of negative x is the same as just writing cosine of x. So cosine of x equals cotangent of x. Now what? Sines and cosines? Suppose we can. So cosine of x over 1 is equal to, cotangent is what? Cosine of x over sine of x. Okay, now what? You can't multiply straight across because of the equal sign, but we do have a proportion, right? Fraction equal to a fraction, so we could cross multiply. Were you suggesting gonna suggest multiply by sine of x, or no? Oh, you're gonna multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, that would also work. Okay. All right. So if we cross multiply, we get cosine of x is equal to cosine of x times the sine of x. Helpful. Remember, we're trying to get a number on one side here. Divide both sides by cosine of x. If I divide this by cosine of x, what do I get? 1. Ooh, there's a number. If I divide this by cosine of x, what do I get? I get the sine of x. Sine of x equals 1. Now, there are other options here. You could end up with cosecant of x equals 1. That would be sufficient. You could actually also come up with cosine of x equals 0. Although that one would be a little bit harder to prove. Questions? Right. Tomorrow and Wednesday, because your homework's due Thursday, tomorrow and Wednesday we're going to discuss verifying trig identities. I'm going to give you like 8 helpful hints to start with, and then we're going to just do lots and lots and lots of identities together as a class. If we have some time at the end of class on Wednesday, maybe we'll do some little puzzles, verification puzzles.